Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the Honest Booktuber Tag. I was tagged by Ellen from Big Hard Books and Classics, and this tag was created by Harriet Rosie, and I will link to both of their videos below. Question number 1 is, have you ever lied about reading a book? And I feel like I may have answered this in another tag, but a couple of years ago I was at a theater production of A Christmas Carol, and the person next to me was talking about Bleak House and asked me if I'd read it, and it sounded vaguely familiar, so I said yes. But I realized a couple of weeks later that I had not read it, that I'd just seen the miniseries, and that was why it sounded familiar. Question number 2 is, have you ever avoided a book because of controversy around the content or author? In general, no, and especially if they're dead, I don't think it particularly matters. That said, I really can't look at any of Marion Zimmer Bradley's books anymore without thinking, and she was a pedophile. So even though she's dead and wouldn't benefit, yeah, that is the one thing that I can't get over. So apparently that's the bridge too far for me, I guess. Question number 3 is, have you ever been sent a book for free and not disclosed it? I think it's funny that this is phrased in such a way that it could include gifts. I don't see any reason that you need to mention that the book was free. I mean, I do regularly mention that my books came from the library, or when I used to volunteer at the library warehouse in Houston and I used to get books out of the recycling bin, I usually mentioned it just because I was excited that they were free. But I mean, I think the implication here is not so much that it's gifts or freebies, or as that it's from the publisher or author. My channel is so small, and I don't go out of my way to request review copies, because I know there are people with smaller channels than mine who do get review copies because they're requesting them. Well, I have had independent or self-published writers contact me and ask me if I will read their books. I generally don't do that, just because 9 times out of 10, the books that they're trying to sell me on aren't things that particularly interest me, and I don't think it's in their own best interest to sell me on that. And of course, there's always the possibility that they're just not selling their work as well as they could have, and maybe I would enjoy it, but life is too short for that. I did say yes to one book, and I did mention that I had gotten it promotionally. That was Len Mokos's The Bad Canadian, which was exactly up my alley when he pitched it to me. And this was when my channel was not even half the size that it is now, so I was almost surprised that he pitched it so well. But it was exactly the kind of stuff that I would enjoy, and so I thought that's the way to do it. If you are a self-published or indie author and you're trying to contact people, find people whose material is genuinely in that interest zone. So anyway, that's not what the question asked, but just, you know, if you are somebody who wants to go out there and contact booktubers to talk about your book, make sure that they're people who are interested in the kind of thing that you're writing, because genuinely, of the about 12 people who've gotten in touch with me and said, would you be interested in my book, it's been things that just didn't interest me in the least. And I could have still read it, and I could have given an honest opinion, but if you're trying to do this as a promotional deal, I think you owe it to yourself and your own product to talk to people who are going to enjoy it. Don't sell your romance to someone like me who's very critical of romances, even though I do sometimes read them. Don't sell your really fluffy YA fantasy to me when that's something I'm very critical of, even when it's professionally edited. Because that's the thing, I've very rarely seen a self-published book, and even from independent publishing houses, so many of them are full of typos and things that should have been caught. And that's not distracting if somebody can fall in love with it for another reason. So anyway, that's not really what this question was aimed at, but that's kind of a pet peeve of mine, because I feel like people are wasting their time contacting people who aren't going to give them great reviews unless, yeah, but anyway, next question. Let's stop talking about that. Number 4 is, have you ever bought a book with no intention of reading it? And again, I suppose the implication there is that you're buying it just to be part of a trend, but realistically, most of the time, if I buy a book without intending to read it, it's because I'm giving it to someone and they have different tastes than my own. I have bought an antique book that I wanted to look at the pictures of and that I liked the look of, more than because I wanted to read it. It was a botany textbook from the 1880s, and I just thought it looked interesting. I actually did end up reading most of it, but I bought it with the intent not to. I think a lot of coffee table books you buy to flip through and not to read, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the idea that that's something you would need to lie about and be ashamed of not all books are meant to be read. Some of them are meant to be looked at, and who cares? Again, I think there's a snobbery associated with both sides of that. Both, you know, people who want to have nice books and frown on people who dog-ear pages, but also on the flip side, people who think that books barely exist as physical items. They are physical items. If you buy a book because it's pretty, who cares? I mean, there's no shame in that, so yeah. Question number 5 is, have you ever gotten caught up in booktube drama? Not particularly. Most of the drama I find out about a month later. There were 2 exceptions about over the past year where I saw videos that caused drama before they were eventually deleted. So in both of those cases, I did respond to people talking about the drama because I think it was being misrepresented, because once it's been deleted, people start discussing it in other terms. And I think in one case, people assumed the original video had been much worse than it actually was. And I think it was just a joke that didn't land properly, which was still unfortunate, but, you know. And in the other case, I think people were being a little bit more forgiving of something that was actually genuinely harsh. So I did talk about that just because I felt like I had seen it, and a lot of people were talking about that without having seen the original bits. But in general, I never know about drama until a month later when people are commenting on it. So I keep my mouth shut because I feel like if I haven't seen it, I'm not in a position to really talk about it. Question number 6 is, have you ever had a hate comment and did you respond? I have never had, I guess, a hate comment. I did a video talking about basically the marketing of Fluent Forever, which was a book and is now an app. And I kind of mixed it in with some cutesy pictures of my nephew being read storybooks. And I had one person who snarked about how the book worked for them and they really enjoyed it. And I did respond to that and say, okay, that doesn't really have anything to do with what I said, and they deleted their comment afterwards. I did have one other person who was kind of mansplaining about how to do a good review, and I had to point out to him 2 or 3 times that the video he was watching was not a review. It was me talking about the marketing campaign. Yeah, he eventually stopped commenting, so I guess he either gave up or disagreed with me. Question number 7 is, have you ever made a video just because you knew it would get views? I feel like that's every video, because otherwise this would be a private video diary and I wouldn't make them public. I think this is meant to relate back to drama, but anytime you use tags, keywords, you fill in the metadata for anything, of course you're looking for views. I know it's popular to say, I never look at my subscriber count. And I don't think subscriber counts matter because, I mean, I think fewer than 20%, I get fewer than 20% views on my videos versus the subscriber count, so I don't think subscriber count matters in any kind of grand scheme of things. But, you know, I think the idea of trying to shame people because they want to have views, I think most of us are here because we want to have a conversation. And whether you're hoping to have a conversation with one person, 10 people, or 100 people, or I would say probably not thousands, because the really big channels that do get thousands of comments can't really have conversations with them because there's too much density there. But it would be a private video journal for all of us if we didn't want other people to watch them. Question number 8 is, if you could go back to the beginning of your channel, would you do anything differently? And I just said this in another tag, in the Booktube Real Talk tag, but yes, I would use my phone instead of my webcam for the first 6 months that I was making videos, because the audio was terrible, and it's much better on the phone. Question number 9 is, are there any channels you wish you could be more like? I think it would be great to have the work ethic of somebody like like David from The Poptimist, who does clever reviews and also has all those great GIFs that are inserted that add humor, and I mean, I think that's great. But 1, if you were doing that, you'd just be copying him, and 2, that's a lot of work, and this is a hobby, and I think it would take away from the fun. I do admire a lot of the people who put in the effort of scripting their videos and going about this a lot more methodically than I do, but realistically, I think if I were to try to do that, it would just discourage me from making videos at all. So for me, the trade-off will be lower quality, but something that exists, versus higher quality that I overthink and then never film. So Question number 10 is, what is something that you love about your channel? I think it's been a lot of fun to watch how the way I talk about things has changed, which it has somewhat. I think in a lot of ways it's almost like having a fun video Goodreads to go back and look at. So that's kind of entertaining too, and I love that. I'm gonna tag, when I just did the real talk tag, I flipped it because I just was tagged in both of these, so I'm going to tag Ariel from She Wants the Diction, who may have done this already, I haven't checked. But if not, anybody else who is watching this and hasn't done this tag but would like to, please consider yourself tagged. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.